Suzanne Renee Mormon grew up in the small town of Alexandria, Indiana, the youngest of four siblings. She graduated from Alexandria Monroe High School in 1989 and went on to Purdue University, where she earned a degree in elementary education. Teaching was Suzanne's calling. She loved children and briefly worked as a middle school teacher right out of college. But her life path soon took a different direction. Suzanne had caught the eye of an older student athlete named Barry Morphew. Barry was a charismatic star of the baseball team in their hometown. On August 5th, 1994, at just 23 years old, Suzanne married Barry in a big church wedding back in Indiana. The couple seemed perfectly matched. Suzanne was warm, nurturing, and devout. Barry was confident, hardworking, and deeply protective of her. Barry relished being the breadwinner, and Suzanne was happy as the supportive housewife and later stay-at-home mom. That family structure, where the husband loves being the provider and the wife loves being the homemaker, they fit that to a T, recalled a longtime friend. For the first years of their marriage, the Morphews lived in Indiana. Barry ran a landscaping and lawn maintenance business. Barry had a known competitive side. As a former athlete who once even got a minor league tryout, Barry applied that same drive to business and to hunting, his favorite hobby. Suzanne, meanwhile, left her teaching job in order to care for their children as a stay-at-home mom. The Morphews had two daughters, Mallory in 1999 and Macy in 2003. By all appearances, they were a picture-perfect family, attractive, church-going, and financially comfortable. Yet, life tested them. In her early 20s, even before having kids, Suzanne was diagnosed with Hodgkin's lymphoma, a type of lymphatic cancer. She fought it bravely, and it went into remission. Tragically, the cancer returned around 2018 when Suzanne was in her late 40s. Once again, she underwent grueling treatment and beat it once more. Barry stood by her through these health scares and often reminded people how he cared for Suzanne during her illness. Investigators would later hear that Barry sometimes used her survivor story to exert guilt or control, allegedly warning Suzanne that if she left him, she would lose financial support for medical bills. Outwardly, though, he played the role of a devoted husband caring for his wife. Suzanne's successful fight against cancer twice over became a source of pride and gratitude for the family. By 2018, with Suzanne healthy and the girls growing up, Mallory even heading off to college soon, the Morphews decided on a major change. They sold their longtime Indiana home and moved west to Colorado in April 2018. The move was prompted by several factors. They loved the outdoor lifestyle that Colorado offered and wanted to be closer to Mallory, who would be attending college in the same state. The family had just endured Suzanne's cancer recurrence earlier that year, and with the treatment behind her, they saw the Rockies as a place of healing and new opportunity. Barry obtained a volunteer firefighter position and expanded his landscaping business, registering it as Sunset Farms LLC by August 2018. He also worked as a subcontractor for a local builder, earning a reputation as a skilled landscaper and handyman. The family purchased a $1.5 million home on Puma Path, a secluded hilltop residence with stunning mountain views. Suzanne herself thrived in Colorado. She joined a church, built new friendships in the tight-knit community, and spent her free time riding her bike on scenic mountain trails. However, hindsight painted a more complicated picture. After the tragedy that would later unfold, some friends recalled subtler signs that not everything was perfect. One of Suzanne's oldest friends, Sheila Oliver, noted that after moving to Colorado, Suzanne began opening up more about her marriage struggles. At first, Sheila was shocked. She had always thought of Barry and Suzanne as the ideal couple, but Suzanne confided that Barry could be moody and overbearing, and that she sometimes felt isolated being away from her Indiana support network. Still, in 2018 and 2019, these were just quiet concerns shared only in confidence. On the surface, Barry and Suzanne kept up the appearance of a happy union, but in private, years of tension had boiled over. She described Barry as having a Jekyll and Hyde personality, one moment loving and generous, the next angry and manipulative. When in his Hyde mode, Barry would allegedly berate Suzanne, accusing her of imaginary infidelities and even enlist their daughters to take his side in arguments. The couple's fights became so frequent and volatile that one of their teenage daughters later admitted she feared that they would divorce and thought it might be for the best. A revealing text exchange from 2019 showed Suzanne confiding to a friend, "It's Jekyll and Hyde again. I feel like I'm crazy. I just had a conversation with him. Pretty much told him I can't be healthy and stay in this." The friend urged her to stay safe. Suzanne replied that Barry won't speak of divorce and tries to guilt her into staying. One of his tactics, she said, was reminding her of her cancer battles, telling her she couldn't survive without his financial support, or that she owed him for nursing her through chemo. This left Suzanne feeling trapped and indebted, caught in a psychological grip that made her hesitate to leave. But Suzanne had changed too. She had found an emotional lifeline outside her marriage. In late 2018, after the move to Colorado, she reconnected online with Jeffrey Libler, a friend from high school. What began as a casual "howdy stranger" message quickly rekindled a spark. Jeff was married with 6 kids, living in Michigan. Despite the complications, by 2019, they were engaged in a full-fledged, long-distance affair. They communicated almost daily through WhatsApp, Viber, and secret LinkedIn messages, rarely by regular texts or phone calls to avoid detection. Suzanne even saved Jeff in her contacts as a female alias and occasionally used a second phone. The two of them met in person several times under the guise of girls' trips or family visits, including rendezvous in New Orleans, Florida, Michigan, and Indiana. During these escapes, Suzanne confided her marital struggles. According to Jeff, anytime she was alone with Barry, she dreaded it. She didn't want to be alone with him. He recalled Suzanne saying that Barry refused marriage counseling and would tell her things like, "You just need to be who you were to me, and everything will be fine," implying that she was the problem. By late 2019, Suzanne was preparing to end the marriage. In text to her sister Melinda and her friend Sheila, she indicated she was looking at options to separate from Barry. In one message to Sheila, Suzanne recounted telling Barry that she was done, only for him to react unpredictably, alternating between begging her to stay and showing cold fury. He and Mal were together last night, switching it on when he talks with her, Suzanne wrote, implying Barry was turning their oldest daughter against her to maintain control. She added, "I feel no peace when he's here. I'd rather be alone than in this oppression." These messages show Suzanne's mindset. She was on the brink of leaving. Barry, for his part, denied any serious marital problems whenever asked. To acquaintances, he boasted that he and Suzanne had a great relationship. When investigators later interviewed Barry's employees and friends, many said Barry spoke of Suzanne as his angel, and that he acted protective, even possessive of her. But there were hints of insecurity. One coworker recalled Barry complaining that Suzanne drank too much and was getting mouthy, and that he suspected that she was hiding something on Facebook. Indeed, Barry's behavior grew increasingly suspicious. According to Sheila, in September 2019, she witnessed an incident where Barry snatched Suzanne's phone and searched her messages. But the affair with Jeff was so well hidden that he found nothing. Another time, during a family vacation in Mexico in January 2019, Barry confronted Suzanne because she was listening to music on her phone. He irrationally thought she was secretly communicating with someone. Frustrated, Suzanne handed him the phone and said, "Go through it. Do whatever you want," as she later told friends. As spring 2020 arrived, tensions hit their peak. The COVID-19 lockdown had the couple stuck at home together more than ever. In late March 2020, a concerned Suzanne texted a friend, "He's emotionally abusing me. It's the only thing he can do to feel control. She described episodes where Barry would yell at her, then give her the silent treatment for days. In one message, she wrote simply, "I'm done. I can't take this." Finally, on May 6, 2020, just 4 days before she disappeared, Suzanne made her stand. That morning, after driving their daughters to a meeting spot for a camping trip, Suzanne texted Barry the now famous message, "I'm done. I could care less what you're up to and have been for years. We just need to figure this out civilly." It was essentially a written notice of resignation from the marriage. Investigators would later find this text deleted from Barry's phone, but forensics recovered it. Over the next few days, he attempted to win Suzanne over. He suggested that they have a relaxing weekend together since the girls were away. In her private notes, however, Suzanne listed reasons I want to leave, which included Barry's anger and control issues. She also wrote that she was scared of being alone with him, a chilling thought in retrospect. With their teenage daughters off on a camping trip, Suzanne and Barry had the house to themselves. She mentioned to Jeff that it was a sunny day and that she planned to do some gardening and maybe go on a bike ride later on. Around 11 a.m., one of Suzanne's best friends texted her a playlist of new songs. Suzanne replied enthusiastically, sharing that she was soaking up the sun that day. Nothing in her tone seemed amiss. By the early afternoon, Suzanne decided to relax outdoors. Around 2:03 p.m., she snapped a selfie lying on a patterned outdoor cushion, smiling into her iPhone's camera. She sent this picture to Jeff via WhatsApp at 2:07 p.m. It is the last photo ever taken of Suzanne Morphew, timestamped and geotagged at her home on Puma Path. Investigators later referred to it as her last proof of life image. In total, phone records showed Suzanne and Jeff exchanged 59 messages that morning and early afternoon. They talked about future plans, possibly meeting up that summer, and Suzanne expressed how Jeff made her feel understood and loved. Data from Barry's truck telematics and phone logs showed he pulled into the driveway at 2:44 p.m. He had been in town running errands, and he said that he was checking on a landscaping job earlier that morning, roughly 20 minutes prior to arriving home at 2:26 p.m. Barry texted Suzanne, "Heading home, darling," and then a second text a few minutes later, "Did you leave?" when she didn't answer his first text. Barry later claimed that when he arrived home, he found Suzanne's Range Rover in the garage, but not her. He told investigators he assumed that she might be out on a bike ride or sunbathing where he couldn't see her. However, evidence suggests a confrontation occurred almost immediately upon Barry's arrival. At 2:47 p.m., less than 5 minutes after Barry got home, his cell phone did something unusual. The phone was put into airplane mode. The timing is highly suspicious. Just when Barry would have met Suzanne, his phone suddenly stopped transmitting. Prosecutors argued this was deliberate, to conceal his movements or any discerning activity on the property. With Barry's phone offline, investigators relied on other clues. One was telemetry from Barry's Ford F-350 truck. Modern vehicles record events like door openings, gear shifts, and some location data. From 2:44 p.m. onward on May 9th, Barry's truck began logging a series of small events consistent with being driven short distances around the property and being stopped and started multiple times. Meanwhile, Suzanne's phone, actively sending messages moments earlier, abruptly stopped all activity after 2:30 p.m. It did not send any more messages or answer any calls from that point on. What could have happened in that critical window of 2:44 to 3 p.m.? Investigators theorized that Barry surprised Suzanne while she was sunbathing on the deck or out in the yard. Perhaps an argument ensued about her ignoring his texts or something he discovered. It's even possible that Barry found or grabbed Suzanne's phone and discovered her messages with Jeff. Discovering explicit evidence of the affair would have been explosive. The arrest affidavit suggested that Barry might have hunted Suzanne around the house with a weapon. Indeed, Barry later admitted that he was running around outside with a rifle, supposedly taking pot shots at squirrels or chipmunks that afternoon. He told FBI agent Grusing that he often shot small critters near the house because they annoyed him. It's a bizarre alibi, but it places Barry literally chasing after something around the property with a firearm right when Suzanne's communication ceased. Physical evidence also points to a struggle. In the master bedroom, investigators found the door frame damaged with a fresh crack, as if forced open or slammed. This damage was not present on the home inspection write-up done a few years earlier when the house was purchased. There was also an unsecured .22 caliber rifle in the bedroom, and an unspent .22 caliber round on the floor. Barry owned numerous firearms, most supposedly locked in the safe, but at least 2 were found out in the open when police searched. After 2:47 p.m., Barry's phone stayed on airplane mode for a lengthy period, from 2:47 p.m. until around 10 p.m. This is highly unusual behavior for Barry, who was normally glued to his phone for business-related calls and texts. Barry's truck's telematics show that at 6:14 p.m., the truck was put into reverse out of the garage and moved around 96 feet, likely backing up towards the house or up to a side door. Another event stands out at 9:25 p.m. Despite Barry claiming that he was already in bed at 8 p.m., the truck recorded being taken out of park, put in reverse, and backing up 95 feet on the property. Another intriguing clue is that data showed the truck's doors opening and closing multiple times during the night, when Barry claimed he was asleep. A forensic download indicated at least one of the door opening events happened around 3:30 a.m. on May 10th, which could coincide with Barry preparing to leave for Broomfield, which he claimed he left for at 5 a.m. One theory is that Barry actually departed much earlier than 5 a.m., under the cover of night to dispose of evidence and then possibly return, hence why neighbors still saw his truck in the driveway at 5 a.m. The timeline gets murky, but law enforcement believes that Barry did a lot of moving around that night, setting the stage for the missing person call to come. According to Barry, he departed his home around 5 a.m. in Maysville, leaving Suzanne supposedly asleep in bed. He had a prearranged job to fix a retaining wall at a construction site near Broomfield, a suburb outside Denver, roughly a 3-hour drive away from their home. Barry said he loaded his tools and left quietly, texting Suzanne a Happy Mother's Day before hitting the road. That text, sent around 6:10 a.m., went unread. Barry later said he thought poor cell service at their house might be why she didn't reply. Evidence suggests Barry might have actually left earlier than 5 a.m., possibly closer to 4 a.m. Suzanne's phone last pinged a cell tower at exactly 4:23 a.m. near their home, and Barry's truck door opened around that exact same time. But taking Barry's timeline, he drove his truck east towards Broomfield, stopping along the way at a gas station and a McDonald's drive-thru, where he later said he washed his windshield. He checked into the Holiday Inn Express in Broomfield around 8:30 a.m. CCTV footage shows him carrying tools and paperwork into his room. Back at home, neighbors had no idea Suzanne was missing yet. Typically, she might sleep in a bit on a Sunday and then go for a bike ride mid-morning. Barry, in his initial police interview, said that this was her routine. She usually left for rides between 8 and 9 a.m. On this day, however, no one saw Suzanne biking. A few interesting details from that morning. A witness later reported hearing what sounded like heavy rumbling of a bobcat engine or metal scraping in the pre-dawn hours near the Morphew property. If accurate, it could correlate with Barry using his bobcat to move something before he left. Also around 8 a.m., one of Barry's employees got a call from him. Barry told the worker, who was headed towards the same Broomfield site later, that Suzanne was missing and he thought maybe a mountain lion got her. The employee found it odd that Barry would jump to the conclusion so fast. However, that timing is contested. Another account says Barry made the mountain lion comment during a phone call the next day, not on Sunday morning. By 8:46 a.m., Barry was at the Broomfield job site. a property where he was contracted to lay dirt and rock for a wall. Surveillance video captured his truck arriving at a parking lot near the site. Over the next few hours, Barry's activities were strange and seemingly unproductive. He was seen disposing items in several trash dumpsters around the area. One at a bus stop, one at a hotel, one at a McDonald's, one at a Men's Warehouse store, and one near a worksite dumpster. Investigators later dubbed these the 5 trash runs. When later asked about this, Barry claimed he often took advantage of public dumpsters to avoid paying landfill fees, a habit, he said, not an attempt to hide anything. But doing 5 separate trash dumps in one morning is far from normal behavior. Meanwhile, Barry barely did any work on the actual wall project that day. A coworker who arrived in the afternoon found the site largely untouched. Barry's hotel room also yielded odd clues. The bed was unused, and the room reeked of chlorine, with wet towels on the floor as if he had vigorously showered and cleaned up. Mallory, the oldest daughter, had been trying to text and call her mother all day to wish her happy Mother's Day, but she got no answer. She grew increasingly worried and eventually contacted a neighbor, asking if she could go check on Suzanne. Jean's husband went next door and knocked. No reply, and said Susan's car was in the garage. They phoned Barry, who said he hadn't heard from Suzanne either. Notably, he didn't call 911 himself, despite learning his wife was unreachable. He deferred that job to that neighbor.
Are you?
Okay, so I'm the daughter's boyfriend.
Okay.
And I'm here.
Is this your truck?
That's my truck.
Somebody check it out. Never mind, I got something here. So you haven't seen the mom at all, have you?
Yep, so the 2 daughters are gone right now at the moment. The dad is in Denver for a job, and they text her because of Mother's Day, and they haven't heard. The text never went through, like it never delivered since this morning. And she's a big mountain biker. She normally takes her car, and her bike's normally in the back of that. It's gone.
Was this open when you came here?
The neighbor was here that opened it, and then she shut it, and she went back to her house. Her house is right over there.
Okay.
And then I came back and I opened it to come in the house.
Okay.
Yeah.
Have you looked in the house for
I
her?
have, yep.
All right. You looked through everything?
Yes.
You haven't found her?
No.
Okay. All right. What time did you get here?
6 o'clock, and then I went all the way up Fusis, because she's road up there. And I just drove the main road, couldn't find her, and then there's a couple spots that I could check, like trails and stuff. But I wanted to come back here to just, like, check back in and stuff.
Okay. Yeah. Has she ever gone up 225?
Colorado Trail right there?
Like, you know the big hill once you come off the highway?
Well, she hasn't, and I haven't checked there yet because that climb at the beginning is really hard.
Yeah.
And I think that it would be out of characteristic for her to do that, but I mean, someone needs to go there, I think.
Why would you say this, like on camera?
Well, because it's kind of a crazy,
it's
kind of a crazy climb to get up there. It's like not really rideable. You got to push your bike before you can start riding.
All right.
Yeah.
Do you have a driver's license on you?
Barry was supposedly driving back from Denver and out of cell phone range, according to what the neighbor relayed. This was untrue. Barry, at that very moment, was in Broomfield with full cell phone coverage. But he had turned his phone off earlier until around 4:30 p.m. when he actually began driving home.
And so then once he'd been gone a while, I drove up here.
I know this is a weird question, but do Barry and Suzanne get along pretty well?
You can answer honestly.
You know, I think they've had some problems.
Okay.
Yeah, in the past.
Like, just normal...
Normal husband and wife type deal.
They, like, talk about separating or anything
they
like
have,
that?
yeah.
Okay.
I would, yeah.
And you know this through
Macy.
Yeah, I'm
Macy.
very close with her.
Yeah, it's
daughter.
important that you get this
I know.
Deputy Brown finally got in contact with Barry by phone at around 7:10 p.m. Barry sounded anxious and claimed he was almost home. He told the deputy that Suzanne hadn't responded to him either and that she often biked on trails near the house. He also described her attire and gear. He specifically mentioned her turquoise bike helmet, saying Suzanne usually wore it, and a hydration backpack on rides. Deputy Brown and a colleague began searching the area, driving the route Suzanne was thought to have taken. At approximately 7:36 p.m., Less than a mile from the Morphew residence on County Road 225, they spotted something off the side of the steep embankment.
Suzanne? Maybe see if you can get that up to the road and then check the serial number or call the husband and see what kind of bike she has. Salida Chippy, buddy. Can you try to call the husband and see what type of bike she has? Right now I'm staring at a Santa Cruz, blue in color.
We'll do 9:35.
It was Suzanne's mountain bike. Lying on its side partway down a rocky slope, the bike was intact. No bent wheels, no skid marks off the gravel road, no blood, no sign of a violent crash. The scene immediately struck the deputies as odd. He later wrote that he started to question if something criminal had occurred, as it looked like the bike was purposely thrown in this location. The officers called out Suzanne's name repeatedly in the area, getting no response. They carefully retrieved the bike. The gear was in neutral, and the chain was off, which can happen if a bike is tossed. There were no drag marks or footprints indicating that an injured rider had stumbled away. If Suzanne had been attacked by a mountain lion, as Barry would later suggest, one would expect signs of a struggle. Blood, torn clothing, tracks. There were none. A wildlife officer consulted in those first hours said the scene was inconsistent with a lion attack. Those leave lots of blood and a body is usually dragged away, not vanishing without a trace. At 8:42 p.m., Barry arrived on the scene where deputies were with the bike.
Where is it? Where's the bike?
Oh, it's right there.
Where was it?
It was like just right down here in this little embankment right here. Sorry, check this, dude. We got the husband on the scene here with me.
I'm here with my daughter. She's at Harry's
Oh,
house.
okay. Alright, yeah, you can go down
Was it
there.
a crash?
I mean, the bike looked, the way it was laying, it kind of looked like it, but there's not really that much damage to the bike. That's the thing.
Lion?
Yeah, it was just like
Was there
lying.
no lion? Mountain lion?
I didn't see anything that would
I didn't see
indicate,
anything, and they're not letting us go over the side.
because we're getting a
The
track
dogs, they're bringing
Where'd
dogs
you
in.
find her bike? Right
just
here?
right down in here,
Do you know
yeah.
where my husband and son are?
They
They're
Yeah.
probably went down to Puma,
Yeah,
down to the
so-
We're at
house.
my house.
okay.
And Bear, just, I know this is tough right now. Do you mind if I just get a driver's license for our report stuff? Search and rescue's on their way. Hey, Barry, and then I'll probably need your help to kind of tell me some of the trails that she frequents so we can backtrack some of that stuff.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
I'm sorry.
Oh, man. And she's an avid mountain biker, right?
It's just started about 2 months. She's been here.
And just a confirmation, you left this morning at 5.
She was sound asleep.
Okay. And she told you she was going to go bike
She
riding?
bikes every day, yeah.
Okay.
She said she's going to bike when she gets up.
So she was asleep in the bed when you left. Did you say bye to her or anything?
No, she's sound asleep.
Okay.
Always leave it.
So the last time you probably actually saw her was this morning. That was it, right?
Yeah, I've been in Bridgeville. I got a big job up there. I've been there all day working.
Gotcha.
I'm sorry, you need to calm down.
No, it's all good, man.
Um,
we're doing the best. We got
Did
a
they
lot of
check
people
the house?
coming.
Did they?
Yeah,
They
they've got,
looked through the house.
yeah, they got the house. So what we're doing is we're keeping people out of the house because if the dog comes, they want to get a scent from out of the house.
Yeah.
So they don't want to pollute that scent. So that way we can start trying. And I walked up this. Like I said, I didn't see anything out of the ordinary. Nothing looked like.
I wonder if she was hurt, if she could climb up the hill.
But that's the thing. When we came here, still was daylight, right? So if she was right here, somebody would have easily, you know what I mean? Just because it was like literally like right down. It was this. I mean, if we saw it coming in, somebody would have definitely seen it too, you know.
Multiple officers later said Barry's behavior was not what they expected of a distraught husband. Undersheriff Andy Roerich said that Barry was oddly not asking any questions and didn't seem focused on where his wife could be. Instead, Barry was task-oriented. He insisted that they should search specific areas, one being the river, which was very high and swift that spring, as if planting the idea that she could have fallen in. Barry's arms were also observed with several scratches and cuts, some of which looked a few days old, others fresher. When asked, Barry claimed he got scratched by tree branches while shoveling dirt or during hikes in the preceding days. Meanwhile, investigators were already looking at Barry's timeline on May 10th. At the scene, they asked him to recount his day. He told deputies he left at 5 a.m. for Broomville, checked into the hotel around 8, and headed to the work site. He mentioned he had difficulty reaching Susan because of spotty cell service at their house, which is true. Reception is poor in that area. However, one detail did not escape law enforcement. When the 911 call came in, dispatch noted Barry was supposedly out of reach driving from Denver, but phone records showed he was in service and even sent texts and calls from Broomfield that day. Later on May 10th, around 10 p.m., officers found Barry's behavior noteworthy at home. When first responders were combing through the Morphew property, Barry was eager to help, but in particular ways. He would, for example, go upstairs and then come down with one of Suzanne's journals, handing it to the deputies and saying, "Look at this. Maybe it's someone from her past." He floated the idea that Suzanne might have been abducted or that she could have staged her own disappearance due to depression. Those theories didn't sit right, because Suzanne's family said she would never leave her daughters willingly, and she'd survived much harder times, like her battle with cancer. Barry also strangely mentioned a mountain lion out of the blue, planting that idea more than once. This raised suspicions that he was trying to steer the narrative. The search continued overnight into the next day. On May 11th, searchers discovered Suzanne's bike helmet tossed off the side of Highway 50, roughly 0.8 miles from where the bike was found and about 1.5 miles from the Morphew house. The helmet, like the bike, had no damage or blood. It looked like someone had flung it from a car window into the bushes. Finding the helmet so far from the bike deepened the sense of staging. If Suzanne had crashed, her helmet would have likely been near the bike, not carried a mile away. If an abductor took her, why would they bother to throw the helmet out where it could be found? On the same day, a deputy noticed something very odd at the Morphew house. In the laundry room, the dryer had a bedsheet tangled with a clear plastic syringe cap. It was collected quietly as evidence. At the early stage, they weren't sure what it meant, but it was logged just in case. The house itself yielded few signs of a struggle. There was a strong smell of chlorine bleach in the home, particularly in the garage and near the washing machine. One deputy found what looked like suspected blood on the corner of a door and on the garage floor edge. This was swabbed and sent to the lab. The results would later be inconclusive, or at least not publicly released. The family Range Rover was also examined. Inside were Suzanne's sunglasses, her hydration camel backpack, and an untouched container of her favorite tea. These were items she almost always took biking. Their presence in her car hinted she never actually went on a bike ride that day. By May 11th's end, law enforcement held a press briefing labeling Suzanne as a missing and endangered person. They avoided mentioning Barry or any foul play suspicions publicly yet, but internally, flags were up. Agents started looking into Barry's cell records, credit card swipes, surveillance, and more to verify his alibi. Barry stuck to his story. He last saw Suzanne in bed at 5 a.m. Sunday, went to work, and when he returned, she was gone. He theorized a mountain lion attack or a kidnapping. On May 13th, as suspicion subtly turned toward him, investigators asked Barry to do a polygraph. He declined. His lawyers advised against it. Barry grew more defensive about being considered a suspect. In an emotional interview with CBI agents that day, he pleaded, "Guys, you have to find who did this." When confronted with inconsistencies, He said he was confused due to stress. One of Barry's offhand remarks early on drew particular attention. Talking with sheriff deputies, he mused that maybe Suzanne was riding and got picked up by someone in a car. He added, "I hope to God they haven't harmed her, but if they have, I hope it was quick." It was subtle, but in missing persons cases, the spouse speaking in past tense or acknowledging death is seen as a red flag. By May 15th, after days of exhaustive searching with drones, ATVs, dive teams in rivers, and hundreds of volunteers, not a single sign of Suzanne was found beyond the bike and helmet. Investigators now strongly suspected foul play, and privately that Barry was involved. Yet, they had no body, no eyewitnesses, and only circumstantial evidence. To the public, Barry tried to maintain a hopeful face. On May 17th, he released a video plea offering $100,000 of his own money, plus $100,000 of a family friend as a reward for Suzanne's safe return.
Oh, Suzanne, if anyone is out there that can hear this, that has you, please, we'll do whatever it takes to bring you back. We love you, we miss you, your girls need you. No questions asked. However much they want, I will do whatever it takes to get you back. Honey, I love you, and I want you back so bad.
Many people felt for him, a seemingly heartbroken husband. Others felt something was off, that he wasn't making eye contact with the camera, or that his words felt scripted. Investigators searching the Morphew residence discovered an innocuous-looking pen in the master bedroom closet, stashed in a cloth bin with some of Suzanne's bras. This was no ordinary ballpoint. It was a Wi-Fi-enabled spy pen, capable of voice-activated recording. Suzanne's friend Sheila later confirmed she had given Suzanne this device in January 2020, during a girls' trip to Florida. Suzanne's intent was to gather evidence of what she suspected was Barry's infidelity. Ironically, it would end up exposing her own. After retrieving the pen, investigators downloaded its stored audio files. What they heard stunned them. The device had captured several conversations in recent months. Importantly, it did not capture Barry having an affair. Instead, it caught Suzanne in what sounded like affectionate, romantic exchanges with a man named Jeff. The voices revealed pet names, whispered "I love yous," and discussions of future plans together. There were at least 2 distinct male voices recorded. One was clearly Barry. The pen apparently picked up a mundane chat between Barry and Suzanne at home, but the other was this mysterious Jeff, and the tone was unmistakably intimate. This was the first hard evidence to investigators that Suzanne was having an affair. It both complicated the case and clarified it. On one hand, it presented a clear motive. If Barry found out or even suspected the affair, that could drive violence. On the other hand, it meant investigators had to rigorously clear the lover as a suspect. Was it possible Jeff himself was involved in foul play? Early on, they couldn't ignore that possibility. Identifying Jeff became a priority. The FBI leveraged information from the pen recordings and Suzanne's phone backups. They found that in her contacts and communications, this person had been carefully concealed. Suzanne and Jeff had communicated via WhatsApp and LinkedIn, platforms whose data is not easily accessible without devices in hand. The pen provided some context to their talks, but not the full context like last names or locations. The FBI had to do some old-fashioned detective work. They combed through Suzanne's social circles and yearbooks, listing all Jeffs or similar names from her past. They also subpoenaed LinkedIn for account info tied to her profile, and they hit pay dirt. Suzanne had recently looked up a profile for a Jeffrey Libler. Combing this with the yearbook info, Jeff being a high school classmate from Alexandria, Indiana, they identified him in the fall of 2020. Who was Jeff Libler? Jeff was a married father of 6 living in Michigan. working in the automotive supply industry. He and Suzanne had a brief fling decades ago after high school, then lost touch. In 2018, Suzanne reached out with that "Howdy Stranger" message and rekindled a connection. It blossomed into a long-distance romance. Jeff later told investigators that he and Suzanne communicated nearly daily, often for hours, using WhatsApp or burner phones to keep it a secret. They even devised a system. Suzanne saved Jeff's number in her contacts under a woman's name to avoid Barry's suspicion if he ever saw it. They met in person about 6 times over 2 years, often syncing up these meeting times with Suzanne's trips for family or education. For instance, February 2019 in New Orleans, Jeff had a work conference and Suzanne met him there. Later in 2019 in Florida, possibly coinciding with a trip to see her friend. July 2019 in Michigan, Suzanne visited her father and snuck away to see Jeff. October 2019 in Dallas, Jeff was on a business trip, and Suzanne routed her own trip through Dallas, and they spent 2 nights at a hotel. February 2020, in Florida again, during the girls' trip. The spy pen accidentally caught audio of them together there. There was also mention of a planned April 2020 meetup in Colorado that was canceled due to COVID travel restrictions. The affair was intense. Investigators recovered some deleted texts from Suzanne's iCloud. In one exchange on April 21st, 2020, Suzanne wrote to Jeff, "I want to be with you. I can only be me when I'm with you. You know, I was born to love you." Jeff reciprocated with, "I love you" as well. They even talked about marrying someday. The emotional fulfillment Suzanne found with Jeff contrasted starkly with her despair about Barry. It painted a picture of a woman who felt trapped in one life and yearning to start another. From law enforcement's perspective, Jeff had to be cleared. If Jeff were a rogue element, that would change everything. So the FBI quietly tracked Jeff's whereabouts on May 9th and 10th, 2020. Jeff told them up front that he was at home in Michigan with his family. It was Mother's Day. Ironically, his wife was home too, unaware about his double life. To verify this, Jeff provided receipts. He had gone to Home Depot and a restaurant in Michigan on May 10th, with timestamped receipts and surveillance confirming he was there. He even gave them his phone records, showing his phone pinging in Michigan all that weekend. This was enough. Jeff had a rock-solid alibi and was hundreds of miles away from when Suzanne vanished. After months of vetting, Jeff was cleared of any involvement beyond being the object of Suzanne's affection. In late 2020, agents confronted Barry with the affair evidence. They tactfully said something like, "We know Suzanne was having an affair with someone named Jeff." Barry's reaction, as recorded, was chillingly calm. He allegedly said, "Maybe in God's eye, this is his way of resolving something." This cryptic response seemed to suggest that Suzanne's affair might have invited divine punishment, essentially rationalizing that her disappearance could be cosmic justice. Agents felt this was as close to an admission of motive as one might get. Barry didn't explode in surprise or anger at hearing of the affair. Instead, he gave philosophical answers. Later, when pressed if he knew about the affair, Barry claimed he had no idea whatsoever. But text messages between Barry and Suzanne, as well as between Suzanne and friends, showed Barry did suspect she was seeing someone. He just didn't know who Jeff was, as he couldn't find proof, as Suzanne had expertly hidden it. In the first few days after Suzanne went missing, the community of Salida rallied in support. Hundreds of locals volunteered to scour the rough terrain around the Morphew's home. In addition to the volunteers, there was a multi-agency search effort that included drones, scent tracking dogs, mounted patrols on horseback, and even divers checking nearby ponds and rivers. It was one of the largest search operations the region has ever seen. Neighbors prayed and held on to hope that Suzanne was lost or injured, but still alive. But as the search stretched from days into weeks with no trace of Suzanne, suspicions quietly shifted towards Barry. Law enforcement was careful not to publicly accuse him at the time, But investigative leaks and subtle clues fueled speculation. People noticed that while Barry gave a teary video plea on May 17th, he didn't join the big volunteer searches in late May. Instead, he kept a low profile or was seen moving materials from his home. Then, there were Barry's own statements that set off alarm bells. Early on, he floated the mountain lion theory more than anyone else. On May 11th, he called one of Suzanne's friends and said, "It's the only thing that makes sense. A mountain lion must have got her because nothing else is showing up." Wildlife experts dismissed that idea quickly. Additionally, FBI agent Grusing would later testify on May 13th when agents told Barry, "We suspect an intimate partner homicide." He didn't react with outrage or denial. He simply listened quietly. He also didn't object to them taking swabs of DNA, searching his vehicles, or even seizing all of his guns. In isolation, cooperation is a good thing, but investigators sometimes interpret a lack of protest or emotion as a sign of calculation. Barry may have been confident they wouldn't find anything, given how meticulously he had cleaned up. Suzanne's family grew increasingly vocal as the summer of 2020 went on. Her brother, Andrew Mormon, was not shy about pointing the finger. Andy came to Colorado from Indiana multiple times to push the investigation. In late September 2020, unsatisfied with the official search progress, Andy organized a large volunteer search over 5 days. Over 700 volunteers combed the area in that effort. During that search, there were dramatic moments. Cadaver dogs alerted at 3 separate locations. One of these locations was a plot of land in the Longhorn Ranch subdivision that Barry had purchased in the spring of 2020. The dogs' interest there sparked rumors that Suzanne's remains or scent might be present. For a couple of tense days, the FBI and CBI excavated that plot and 2 other spots where the dogs hid. Andy gave blunt quotes to the media. "My sister was murdered, and she's buried somewhere close. I think Barry had something to do with it." Ultimately, as the sheriff's office statement recapped on September 29th, nothing of value was found from those searches. It was a big disappointment. But Andy Mormon didn't back off. He criticized Barry for not participating in the volunteer search. Andy told reporters he found Barry's behavior odd and that Barry seemed reluctant to communicate with him. After months of silence, aside from the initial plea, Barry gave a media interview in early October 2020 to a CBS affiliate. In that interview, he maintained his belief that Suzanne was abducted. He insisted, "I have never hurt my wife. I love my wife. I would never do this." He suggested that perhaps someone who knew Suzanne, a transient worker or neighbor, could have taken her, and he criticized the sheriff's office focus on him. He also said the sheriff's office screwed the whole thing up from the beginning by not properly sealing off the scene or checking road cameras. This adversarial stance towards law enforcement so early on was striking. Many thought if he truly believed Suzanne was out there and needed finding, why undermine the search? But if he knew she wasn't coming back, attacking the investigation could be an attempt to shift blame. Pressure on Barry gradually increased. On the one hand, his daughters, Mallory and Macy, stood by him unwaveringly. They moved back to Indiana with him after a few months, since they had extended family there and presumably felt hostility living in Colorado. But investigators noted something else. In November 2020, Barry started liquidating assets. He sold Suzanne's Range Rover, for which he had power of attorney, and he sold one of their Indiana properties. There was talk he might list the Puma Path house, which he eventually did in 2021. Additionally, on June 1st, 2020, less than a month after she vanished, Barry filed for guardianship of Suzanne in order to manage her estate. He also sold an older home in Indiana with a net gain of $750,000 going to him. These moves struck some as fast for a husband who presumably hoped for his wife to return. In public, Sheriff Spence and DA Linda Stanlin maintained that they were investigating aggressively and that nobody had been cleared. Barry's name was never officially announced as a suspect in 2020, but reporters noted he wasn't ruled out either. In a rare comment, Sheriff Spez said that in October 2020 that they did not believe it was a wild animal or stranger abduction, and that the investigation was progressing in a new direction. A subtle hint focusing on foul play by someone close to Suzanne. One more notable event in early 2021. Barry was caught submitting a mail-in ballot in Suzanne's name for the 2020 presidential election. When questioned, he said, "I wanted Trump to win. I figured all these other guys are cheating, and I know Suzanne would have voted for Trump anyways." He admitted this on record. It showed a willingness to lie and forge his missing wife's signature, suggesting he assumed she wasn't coming back. He was charged with a misdemeanor in 2021 and later pleaded guilty, receiving community service. On May 5th, 2021, as the one-year anniversary of Suzanne's disappearance drew near, Barry Morphew was arrested. The Chaffee County Sheriff Office, with CBI and FBI agents, executed the search warrant at a highway pull-off where Barry had been working with a backhoe. He was taken into custody without incident. The charges: first-degree murder after deliberation, tampering with a deceased human body, tampering with physical evidence, attempting to influence a public servant. The arrest affidavit ran 129 pages long. It was initially sealed to protect juror impartiality and because it contained highly detailed personal information, and it remained largely sealed until later in the year. Disheveled and in an orange jumpsuit, he appeared with two high-powered defense attorneys, Drew Nielsen and Iris Eaton. Bail was initially denied, as is standard with first-degree murder charges. A preliminary hearing was set for August 2021 to determine whether the case would proceed to trial. The arrest drew national attention. Many felt it validated long-held suspicions. Barry's daughters, Mallory and Macy, publicly supported him and attended a June 2021 bail hearing, sitting beside him and, at times, holding his hand. They insisted they never doubted his innocence, an emotionally complex dynamic that raised questions about how they might figure into a future trial. District Attorney Linda Stanley, newly in office in January 2021, held a confident press conference following the arrest. She emphasized that though Suzanne's body had not been found, the evidence of homicide was sufficient and that a no-body case can be successfully prosecuted. Still, such cases are difficult. Prosecutors must prove both death and the defendant's responsibility without a recovered victim. During the 4-day-long preliminary hearing in August of 2021, prosecutors presented a preview of their case to the courtroom. Key points included Suzanne's texts about the failing marriage and her "I'm done" message, audio from the covert spy pen revealing her affair with Jeff, Barry's shifting stories, including contradictions about how he woke up on May 10th, 5 separate trash dump trips in Broomfield the day Suzanne was reported missing, photos of healing scratches on Barry's arms and hands, and accounts from family and friends that Suzanne feared for her safety. At times, Barry shook his head or wept softly as intimate messages were read. His daughters occasionally left the room in tears. Judge Patrick Murphy ruled that there was probable cause to proceed on all counts, but noted the case was highly circumstantial. He later allowed bail, setting it at $500,000 cash only. Barry posted bond in September 2021 and was released on GPS monitoring, relocating in order to reduce community tension. A May 2022 trial date was set, but the prosecution ran into discovery problems. Large evidence dumps arrived late, some expert opinions evolved without timely notice, and crucially, partial CODIS hits tied to DNA evidence were disclosed months after the preliminary hearing. Judge Ramsey Lama, who took over after Judge Murphy retired, found a pattern of discovery violations and imposed severe sanctions. He barred 11 of the state's 16 proposed experts, including the cell phone analyst, the truck data expert, the DNA expert, and the tranquilizer expert. With key technical testimony excluded, the prosecution's narrative was gutted. At the same time, investigators had developed leads suggesting a potential search area might yield Suzanne's remains once the snow melted. With the trial looming and their expert bench drastically reduced, prosecutors faced a stark choice. 9 days before trial, DA Lindsay Stanley moved to dismiss the case without prejudice, citing the need to pursue the new search area and the practical impossibility of trying the case effectively without excluded experts. The judge granted the motion. Barry walked free, hugging his lawyers and daughters. Suzanne's relatives were devastated, calling it a technicality born of prosecutor missteps. Some legal observers noted that dismissing without prejudice preserved the option to refile charges if new evidence, such as a body, was found, avoiding the risk of an acquittal that would bar retrial. Public scrutiny of the DA's office intensified. A disciplinary panel later recommended disbarment for Linda Stanley over her handling of this case, and another one, citing failure to ensure discovery compliance. The Colorado Supreme Court ultimately agreed with this. The case not only remained unresolved, but it ended the DA's legal career. After the dismissal, Barry filed a $15 million federal civil rights suit against prosecutors, investigators, and local agencies, alleging malicious prosecution and wrongful arrest. Most claims were dismissed due to prosecutor immunity and a judicial finding that there had been probable cause at the time of arrest. By September 2024, the case was fully dismissed. Barry's team vowed to appeal, but the path forward looked narrow. Barry was no longer facing criminal charges, though authorities retained the right to refile. The prosecution's case had been hampered by procedural errors rather than judicial findings of innocence. Meanwhile, Suzanne's family continued to press for answers, holding out hope that new evidence and ultimately justice could still emerge. On September 22, 2023, investigators with the Colorado Bureau of Investigations were conducting an unrelated search for a missing person in a remote area. In a stretch of remote high desert scrubland, they came across human remains. The scene was a shallow, clandestine grave, a depressed patch of earth partially covered by debris. The remains were skeletal and slightly scattered, as if disturbed by animals over time. CBI quickly secured the site and later alerted county officials after finding items that suggested a possible link to Suzanne Morphew. Among the evidence were fragments of clothing consistent with what Suzanne had last been seen wearing, possibly a bike jersey or shorts, and a single unfired bullet near the grave. The caliber wasn't publicly disclosed, but Barry owned firearms, including a .22 and other calibers, which drew attention. Within days, forensic experts confirmed through dental records that the remains belonged to Suzanne. The location was about 45 miles south of the Morphew home, in a remote area locals grimly nicknamed the Boneyard because ranchers often found animal bones out there. It was less than an hour's drive from Salida, accessible by highway and rough country back roads. Searchers in 2020 hadn't prioritized that area because it fell outside the initial search radius and it was in another county. The grave was shallow, suggesting Suzanne's body had not been deeply buried. Most of her skeleton was recovered, though her hands, feet, and possibly parts of her skull were missing, likely from animal activity or decomposition. A forensic anthropologist, botanist, and entomologist examined the site and concluded it is unlikely Suzanne decomposed from a fresh body to a skeleton at this location. In other words, she wasn't killed there. This meant that her remains had likely been moved, perhaps first hidden near Salida, then relocated years later once scrutiny faded or Barry prepared to sell their home. Moving a body is always risky, but by 2023, Barry may have felt confident that the trail had gone cold. The remains were transported to the El Paso County's coroner's office for autopsy. On April 26, 2024, the coroner's report was released. It ruled Suzanne's manner of death as homicide, though the cause of death was undetermined. There was no evidence of gunshot trauma, stabbing, or blunt force injury on the bones. The single unfired bullet at the scene remained unexplained. It might have been dropped during burial, planted, or just coincidental litter, though unlikely in such a remote location. Scientists extracted bone marrow from Suzanne's femur and found traces of BAM, the same exact wildlife tranquilizer cocktail investigators had long suspected Barry of possessing. These substances are injectable sedatives used to immobilize large animals. The findings validated the earlier tranquilizer theory, proving Suzanne had been exposed to these drugs right before death. The coroner noted that in humans, such chemicals could cause heavy sedation or even be fatal in large doses. Due to decomposition, toxicologists couldn't determine precise dosage or timing, but they discovered Suzanne's body had begun metabolizing the drugs before she died, meaning she was alive long enough for her system to process them slightly. That suggested that she may have remained conscious, at least briefly, after being darted. The autopsy's conclusion was chilling. Homicide by undetermined means in the setting of BAM intoxication. Essentially, Suzanne was murdered, but the exact mechanism, overdose, asphyxiation, suffocation, or a combination could not be pinpointed. The presence of BAM pointed directly towards Barry. His defense team conceded that these drugs were extremely uncommon, available only to certain veterinarians and one private citizen in that region, Barry himself. Prosecutors verified that no one else nearby had lawful access to BAM at the time Suzanne disappeared. The defense floated alternative theories, suggesting Suzanne might have been abducted and drugged by someone else, or even self-medicated, claims that investigators considered implausible. There was no evidence anyone other than Barry had either the access or expertise to use such chemicals. The condition of the remains added more intrigue. Variations in plant growth and insect activity around the grave suggest the body had not been there the full 3 years. Missing bones could mean that only partial remains were moved. Perhaps once decomposition had advanced enough to make transport easier. Investigators suspected Suzanne was initially hidden closer to home and later moved to that location. The discovery of Suzanne's body in 2023 changed everything. It confirmed her death, eliminating all doubt about voluntary disappearance. It tied her death directly to BAM tranquilizers, substances uniquely linked to Barry. It affirmed homicide and ruled out accident or animal attack. It suggests premeditation, since sedatives imply planning, not impulse. After identification, Barry's attorneys issued a statement expressing the family's shock and grief, maintaining that Barry and his daughters had always hoped Suzanne would walk back through the door. They reiterated his innocence, saying they hoped that finding Suzanne would lead to the real killer. The public largely saw it differently. Many felt this discovery strengthened the case against Barry. Authorities kept some details sealed at first, likely to preserve the integrity of ongoing work. But by June 2025, with a new grand jury indictment, they made their position clear. The remains discovery pointed squarely back to Barry Morphew. The new indictment even stated Barry had admitted to using BAM near the home a month before Suzanne disappeared, perhaps, prosecutors suggested, as practice for what was to come. On June 20th, 2025, a Colorado grand jury in the 12th Judicial District, covering the county where Suzanne Morphew's remains were found, returned a new indictment against Barry Lee Morphew. The charges mirrored those from 2021: first-degree murder, tampering with a deceased human body, tampering with physical evidence, and 2 counts of attempting to influence a public servant for allegedly lying to investigators. This time, prosecutors had the crucial advantage of the body and toxicology evidence, linking Suzanne's death to tranquilizer drugs only Barry had access to. 2 days later, on June 22nd, law enforcement in Arizona arrested Barry on the new warrant. The arrest was handled quietly, and Barry was taken into custody without resistance. His mugshot, showing him with graying hair and a weary expression, quickly reignited media coverage. He was extradited to Colorado, this time to Alamosa County, within the 12th Judicial District. The prosecution was now led by DA Ann Kelly, a fresh face unconnected to the earlier mishandling that plagued the first case. The 2025 indictment, though largely sealed, contained several key updates reported by major outlets. It alleged Barry used the BAM tranquilizer to incapacitate Suzanne and highlighted that he was the only person in the area with access to those drugs. It asserted that Suzanne's body had been moved post-mortem, supporting a theory of premeditation and cover-up. It included forensic confirmation that Suzanne metabolized the drugs, proving that she was alive for a period after being drugged. It referenced Barry's own admission that he had darted deer near the home a month before Suzanne's disappearance. It cited Suzanne's chilling final text, "We need to figure this out civilly," as a potential trigger event for Barry. Because of the earlier dismissal without prejudice, double jeopardy didn't apply. Prosecutors could legally refile the case with new evidence. Barry appeared in Alamosa Court on July 3, 2025, where he once again pleaded not guilty. The judge initially set bail at $3 million cash only. His defense argued it was excessive, but prosecutors cited the seriousness of the charges and potential flight risks. After several hearings on September 5, 2025, Judge Amanda Hopkins modified the bond. Still $3 million, but now allowable via surety or property. This meant Barry could post bail through a bondsman paying roughly $300,000, or 10% of the total. The judge reasoned that involving bondsmen added accountability if he fled. Hopkins rejected the defense's push to reduce the bail to $500,000, but permitted Barry to appear in court unshackled and dressed in civilian clothes to avoid influencing potential jurors. By mid-September, Barry managed to post bond with the help from supporters and one of his daughters. On September 22, 2025, exactly 2 years after Suzanne's remains were discovered, Barry walked out of Alamosa County Jail. His release conditions were strict: house arrest with GPS monitoring, surrender of his passport, no contact with certain witnesses, including Suzanne's family, and a prohibition on firearms, alcohol, or drugs. He was allowed to live at a residence in Gunnison County, permitted to leave only for approved court or medical reasons. Mallory and Macy, Barry's daughters, continued to support him. They wrote letters to the judge advocating for bond reduction and attended court sessions quietly, expressing that they wanted their father home during trial preparations. As of fall of 2025, when I'm recording this video, the case remains in the pretrial phase. A tentative trial date has been floated for summer 2026, but both sides have signaled that preparation will take time. The defense filed motions to suppress certain evidence, arguing some searches were tainted by prior procedural misconduct, though an earlier ruling already denied a dismissal on double jeopardy grounds. Barry's defense, still led by attorney Iris Eaton, maintains that there is not a lick of evidence tying Barry to Suzanne's death. They argue the case remains circumstantial. Prosecutor Ann Kelly has taken a more measured approach than her predecessor, determined to avoid the discovery violations that derailed the 2022 trial. She is requalifying expert witnesses methodically, ensuring full compliance with the evidentiary deadlines. With former DA Linda Stanley disbarred in 2024, the prosecution hopes to restore credibility. Barry faces life imprisonment without parole under Colorado law. His defense hopes to exploit the circumstantial nature of the evidence to create doubt. But the discovery of Suzanne's remains and the toxicology findings have substantially strengthened the state's position. Public sentiment leans towards believing Barry's guilt, though a vocal minority continues to see him as a wrongfully accused man ensnared in a botched investigation. The 2026 trial promises to be one of Colorado's most closely watched cases in years, a climatic attempt to determine, once and for all, whether Barry Morphew killed his wife or has been living under the weight of grave injustice. Suzanne Morphew's story isn't over, but what's already unfolded has changed lives and reshaped how investigators approach missing person cases. 5 years later, the tragedy still reverberates, not only in the courtrooms, but in the lives of those she left behind. Suzanne's daughters, Mallory and Macy, have endured unimaginable loss. First their mother, then years of public scrutiny, accusations, and uncertainty. Through it all, they've stood by their father, insisting on his innocence and praying for closure. When Suzanne's remains were finally found in 2023, that closure came at a painful cost. The confirmation of what many had feared. Her family in Indiana, meanwhile, have pushed tirelessly for justice and reform, calling for her story to serve as a warning about domestic violence and investigative missteps. The discovery of her remains, along with traces of tranquilizer chemicals, shifted public opinion. Gone were the theories of abduction or disappearance, replaced by the grim acknowledgement of foul play. It also brought accountability. Law enforcement learned hard lessons about evidence handling, transparency, and the cost of rushing justice. Prosecutors, too, saw how one mishandled case can erode faith in the system. So many questions remain unanswered. How exactly did Suzanne die? What happened after that final selfie on May 9th, 2020? Was it a moment of rage or a long-planned act? And will a future jury finally decide Barry's fate? Or will uncertainty linger forever? If you found this story powerful, take a moment to remember Suzanne Morphew. Not just the mystery, but the woman behind it. Cases like hers remind us why the truth matters, even when it takes years to find. If you want to see more deep dive investigations into real unsolved cases, hit the subscribe button, turn on notifications, and let me know in the comments which story you'd like me to cover next. Until then, stay safe out there, and I'll see you in my next video.